Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and you're listening to The Venomous Fringe. I'm your host, Chris Fringe, and join me this evening as me and Ryan sit down with a witness from Tennessee who has some Dogman, Bigfoot, and some paranormal experiences to showcase tonight. Before we get started with the interview, just one little small announcement, folks. Today marks 2 years of me starting The Venomous Fringe, and I just wanted to say thank you all for your support. Thank you all for the kind words. Thank you all for sitting here watching me for the last 2 years. I know there are times where the show and things can be controversial. Even myself can say some things. It might seem a little bland to some, but guess what, folks? That's what makes great social commentary when it comes to these topics. And folks, I want to thank you all for your support. I want to thank you all for being there, and to another 2 years, to another decade even. But folks, let's get on with this interview. I cannot wait. Our guest at this time, I want to introduce Hannah to the show. Hannah, welcome to the Venomous Fringe. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic. How about you guys?
I'm doing great, thank you.
I'm doing very well, thank you.
Well, Hannah, you know, where you're at and when we spoke prior to the show, I think no less to be one of the most interesting hotspots for cryptid activity. But before we start talking about all that fun stuff, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, sure. Well, my name's Hannah. I live in a little town outside of Chattanooga, Tennessee, called Eastridge, which is just on the state line of Georgia. I work at our local humane society, and it's just me and my dog.
Humane Society is a very good one. I know a lot of people that work for the Humane Society, so thank you for the work you do, especially looking after the animals and whatnot.
Thank you. That means a lot to me. Thank you.
Absolutely. Now, interestingly enough, when we speak of animals, and of course we talk about cryptids, very interesting paths that we cross, especially with the belief systems and understanding of them. But when we reached out, or at least we're talking about, you had talked about some things that are interesting to us, and I figured I'd go ahead and ask you a few things when it comes to cryptids. So, what was this occurrence that occurred when it come to about with Dogman? Where did it all begin?
It started, I was still a teenager. I mean, before that, I had always loved werewolf movies. American Werewolf in London was one of my all-time favorite movies, but when I was about 19, 20 or so, I discovered The Beast of Bray Road. And I remember seeing the Gable film. The Gable film absolutely terrified me, because the idea of something like that, you know, in our world is impossible. And then I remember the first time I saw an artist rendition of The Beast of Bray Road, it sent chills all up and down my spine. And, you know, and it's been firmly ingrained into my mind. Like, I can close my eyes and I can just see it right now. It's terrifying.
Interestingly enough, I think like everybody else who gets into the Dogman phenomenon, we come from werewolf films. Of course, you mentioned American Werewolf in London. And also, too, you mentioned the Gable film. I wanted to add, you know, you mentioned, it brings my mind because, you know, Gable film to me has always been a very controversial piece of discussion. And despite the whole concept that there has been a revelation almost 10 years now that it is a hoax, what are your overall thoughts on that film?
Well, I know that the man who was the Dogman in the film was a man in the ghillie suit. But the way that he moved, I mean, no person should be able to move like that. I mean, you can see where his back legs come off the ground, and it doesn't look human. I honestly don't know. I mean, but it surprised me when I found it was a hoax. And then, well, I got to say this. The special effects that they used for the short film was really impressive. I think it was, foam rubber and food dye or something like that.
Yeah, it was. It was some sort of rag or something dye, colored
Yeah.
in dye.
hmm hmm it was a very well made film.
Are you convinced though that there could be possibly a bit of like, let's just say, for example, to go about it in a way, do you feel that the film is kind of not, I wouldn't say covered up, but do you think that there's more to the film that wasn't talked about, despite how many researchers had witnessed this guy reenact it?
I would say maybe they were told to be quiet. Yeah.
I'd have to agree with that.
Yeah.
But the Gable film, like, in just in general, talking Dogman topics, is one of the most interesting pieces. And you happen to have heard a few of those cases involving Dogman. And can you tell us a little bit about them?
Yes, absolutely. Well, my first story was told me by my dad, and this happened in broad daylight. And I used to live in a little town called Sell Creek, Tennessee, and it's not a very big town. I mean, it's in between. It's a ways out there. I want to say maybe not quite in the middle of nowhere, but where I lived on mountain. I lived on Sell Creek Mountain, and but anyway, my dad, he was coming home from his dad's one day, and he was about to turn on the highway when he saw what he described to me as looking like a hyena crossing the road. And as it crossed the road, it would look behind him like something was chasing it. And it was on all fours, and he sat there and he watched it as it crossed the road until he couldn't see it again. So, and then there's another instance. My uncle and a friend of his, they were out in the middle of the night and they were coon hunting, and they had horses, and they were in one of the horse fields. It was a full moon. There was falling on the ground, think like a horror movie setting. And they had their Australian Shepherd with them, and they had this really, really big spotlight that they would take and they would, light the surrounding field with. And their flashlight beam landed on what they thought was, just a coyote. And then the thing stood up. They said it was about 8 foot tall, because both my uncle and his friend, they're about 6 foot. And when they said that it stood up, he told me that it screamed at them. And so they hauled ass to their barn. They barricaded themselves in the bathroom that they had built in the barn, and they didn't come out for like an hour or so.
So that's interesting. I want to just go back to the first report with your father. You mentioned seeing a hyena type looking creature. Now, is there any reports of any like coyotes in the area of Tennessee, or any like wild dogs like in a pack, or no?
We definitely have coyotes. Definitely coyotes, because I can hear them. I live in a little suburb area in the East Ridge. And the last couple nights, we have been hearing coyotes. And out in Sell Creek, it's in the middle of nowhere. We would hear coyotes yipping and hollering out in the fields. But I don't think we have anything that my dad described as a hyena running across the road.
As for the second encounter, how long did it take for them to leave the area, and were they convinced that they had seen something that was totally unbelonging this to not be your typical bear or mountain lion or cougar?
Yeah, my uncle said that the eyes were glowing red, either red or green one, when that flashlight hit its face. They couldn't see a face; they just saw its glowing eyes. And but that's the only time that my uncle has ever seen something like that.
Now, your uncle, when he had seen it, did he hear of any additional reports very similar to that as time went on, or on belliness to, in general, anyone out there or seeing things?
No. Mm-mm. Well, the only other thing that I can think of that people in Silk Creek will tell you is the pity pat. And pity pat it's a type of demon of some kind, but it's not a foot tall. We have the pity pat, and then we have old green eyes, and we have maybe a Bigfoot. Yeah, definitely a Bigfoot.
When in Tennessee, where all of this activity took place, has there any? Did he mention anything about any unnatural odors or any smells? Even with your father, did he smell anything that didn't seem to be a normal odor, or in general see anything such as wildlife, or get an idea of the environment that just didn't seem right?
Well, there was a time when he and one of his ex-wives they'd gone hiking somewhere up in the, or let's see, let me think for a minute. I'm trying to remember. Somewhere past Dayton, yeah, Dayton, Tennessee. They had gone hiking in Dayton, and they come up on something that did not want them there. And my dad said that it was grunting and growling and it was pounding the ground with its fists. And he said that this thing ripped a thick branch off a tree and started pounding the ground with it. I know that sounds, that sounds hard to believe, but my dad doesn't like me. And he didn't mention anything about any kind of odor or anything. He just knew that he had to get out of there.
It's interesting when many of the incidents that take place, whether it's Dogmen or Sasquatch, that there's always the sense of not just being watched, but then you have very small environments where there's no animal activity, no wildlife, no birds even, and it leaves you an uncomfortable feeling that does, of course, leave you a bit thinking that, wow, this is so strange. Did your uncle and any subsequent encounters, or at least soon later, did he ever go back out and think to himself, was he more cautious with his hunting?
Yeah, absolutely, because he always carries something on him for defense. He always has firearms in his truck. He carries a knife on him. But it's really weird, because whenever I still lived out there on the mountain, whenever my dog had to go outside, I'd go outside in the middle of the night, and I always felt like something was watching me. And I tried to keep my time outside to a minimum to get back in. I would not see, because, well, I remember one time I shined my flashlight out in the field. And at this point, I was already paranoid, and I really wanted to be inside. And I shined my light, and all I could see was just eyes staring back at me. And I started, my mind automatically thought, it's a booger and it's going to get me. But no, it was just a couple of deer staring at me. But there were a couple of instances where I was coming inside, and I was about halfway across the porch, and I heard what sounded like boots walking on gravel, in the driveway below me because we had an elevated porch up off the ground. And not only did I hear it, the dog heard it too. So I shone my flashlight down there, and there was nothing. But it sounded just like big head boots walking on gravel.
Often we've heard some stories where you hear those pounding sounds, hear those footsteps that do very much sound very frightening, and they do come off in an intimidating factor. Now, you mentioned boogers, and of course for those who are listening who aren't familiarized with that term, boogers, if I'm not mistaken, Hannah, is just another way of calling it in the South of Bigfoot, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So we want to talk about some Sasquatch, Bigfoot, whatever you want to call it. You had mentioned to me also that there have been some subsequent parts of notices that you mentioned to me about possible Bigfoot sightings.
Yeah. This is another story with my dad. I think I want to say in the 90s or the late 80s or so. My dad and his buddy, they love to go camping. And there was one night in particular, they were out and they were, they played guitar and they were sitting around at a campfire and they were playing. And they started hearing this heavy breathing out in the woods. And so they just really didn't think much of it, and they just continued, fiddling around with the guitar and breathing. They could still hear the breathing. And my dad said that whatever it was really liked their guitar playing. And there was another instance where my dad, he had been living in a trailer. And I think it was in the middle of the night or so, and he told me that something could come up and slammed. It was like a car, well, maybe not that much force, but it said it slammed itself on the side of this trailer, and the whole trailer shook. And so he went out there, and he had his pistol with him, and he was looking around. He couldn't find anything, but there was an indentation on the side of the trailer.
Did he believe or overall think it was a bear?
I don't know, honestly. I mean, that we don't have a lot of bear sightings here in where we live, but they are out there. Honestly, I don't know. I should ask him that. I really should. But it really shook him up though. Because I don't know of any bear that could slam. Maybe other than a grizzly bear, but our bears are mostly black bears.
And one of the reasons why I ask that is because often many might think of a different assumption, thinking that, this wasn't any Bigfoots or anything. They don't want to be a believer. They don't want to believe it at first or think of anything more dangerous. They want to think of maybe a bear and whatnot. That leads me to another question. Following that incident, did your father have a difference in change of belief with things out in the wild, much like your uncle when it came to his safety?
Well, at this point, he was already a ghost hunter, so I don't think anything would have surprised him. Him and one of his best friends, they were ghost hunters, and his best friend would always carry a loaded revolver with a silver bullet in it. And and I remember there was an instance where I don't know if I should tell that because that's classified information. So I'll tell you that in messages maybe. But anyway, his friend would always carry a loaded revolver with a silver bullet.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Now, you mentioned to me as well about some paranormal experiences, or at least some things that you wanted to discuss and mention of. Let's begin, too, with the the whole legend of Green Eyes. Now, this is something that I'm
Green
not
Eyes.
necessarily familiar with, so can you please tell a little bit about that?
Absolutely. Well, Green Eyes it's possibly a demon that haunts the Chickamauga battlefield. And I remember reading a story about this guy that was driving his truck down the road that passes by, the battlefield, and he thought he saw a truck coming down, the truck's headlights coming down the opposite end of the road. As he got closer, he found out, well, damn, this isn't a truck, this is something else. And it run him off the road. He said that this thing had big green eyes. Its whole body was mangled. It had long, long hair. And I'm just going off by memory. I'm sorry I'm not being very descriptive, but I'm trying my hardest. He said that, well, he had crashed his truck, and that's when he got a good look at this thing. And the atmosphere at Chickamauga battlefield, especially at night, you get really uncomfortable really quickly when that sun begins to go down, because me and my family, when we still had horses, we would take our horses out on the battlefield and we'd ride a good couple hours. We running late getting back to the camp, getting back to the trailers, and we were in the woods. And I just remember the whole ride back, I was very, very uncomfortable. And the horses, they wanted to go home. They were ready to go. But yeah, this thing, I think it's like a shapeshifter too. Many people have seen it in the form of a Confederate soldier, or in its demon form, or as a big Black Panther with really big green eyes. I myself personally haven't seen it, but I do know of it. And a good friend of mine had actually seen this thing. When she was a kid, I want to say in the 70s, late 70s, or late 60s, early 70s. She said she woke up one night and it was staring in her window.
That's freaky, considering the fact that this is like a Civil War apparition or a ghost or demon. And we often hear, especially with Gettysburg, many of the paranormal experiences that happen from Confederate or at least Civil War soldiers. I can assure that anywhere of those battlefields, or in general, in places such as that, you will find something there.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
And then you also think of it too about when people see these things, instantly their reactions are it's similar to cryptids. The hair on the back of your head stands up, right?
Yeah.
Because
absolutely.
You don't know what you're looking at. And
Yeah.
I've witnessed a few things there and there where I've truly kind of sat back and said, yeah, no, this doesn't seem right. And I've been freaked out. So for you at that age, and in general for what your family also witnessed, how did it feel to go to this place?
It was getting dark, and the only light that we had was, my brother had a hat that had light built into the bill of it, and so that was the only light that we had that could get us back to the trailer. All I wanted to do was just get my horse taken care of, and I wanted to go home. I wanted to get out of there. And even during the day, it's creepy. I've heard stories that at certain times of night, statues will bleed. You'll see the ghosts of soldiers wandering around on the battlefield. There was one story that I'd read just months ago that this lady was up in one of the towers that we have on the battlefield, and if it's the one I'm thinking of, and I've been on top of it. I've walked all those steps up to the top of this tower, and she said she saw the apparition of a Confederate soldier on a horse, but the soldier was like a skeleton, and the horse had like glowing green eyes or something, and it kept repeating the name Amy. Now, I don't know the significance to the name Amy, but she said that she saw it for maybe a minute or two and then it disappeared. But I think the most activity that people see this thing is in a place called Snodgrass Hill. Whether or not I've ridden all over that battlefield, and I've probably ridden past it and didn't know what it was, because this place is huge. I think I was reading about maybe 4,000 people were killed in this battle. I think it lasted for like 2 days or so. And, but, I won't ever I'll always think twice whenever, I go to that place.
Has your dad investigated the area? Has he had like any permission? Because I know that there are some places from like the Civil War that I guess you can't really like go at certain times, or in general, like there's a restriction. Has he investigated that place?
Well, it's funny you should say, because he actually bought a house from the 1800s, and he remodeled it. He put a lot of blood, sweat, and tears into this house. And we come to find out that this house was inhabited by a family. I can't remember their names, but it was a wife, a father, and I think maybe 2 girls. And their ghosts were haunting the house. And we had a big fluffy orange cat that would sit at the bottom of our stairs and would growl while staring at the top of the stairs. And one particular story that I found really amusing. My dad said that the little girl ghost was absolutely fascinated with the washing machine. So he would come in and he'd do his laundry, and he'd go through all the motions of doing the laundry, and he'd come back next day, and the lid would be open when he knew that he closed it. So it got to the point where he actually nailed the door shut. And one day he unnailed the door and the lid was up. So that, and he would tell me that there were bad spirits in this house, but the little girl ghost would keep these bad spirits in check. I've seen the gravestones where this family are buried, and I wish I could remember the names of these gravestones. I'll get with my dad later on, and then I'll get the information that I need, and I'll let you know. So, but yeah, this house was a beautiful house back in the 90s after my dad had done all the work that he had done to it. But now whenever I drive by it and just looking at it now, it's sad. The paint's peeling, the roof is caving in. It's just sad.
Yeah, it is a shame when you look at some of these historical sites and some of these places, and you see how torn up they could be after so many years. So I can understand that. But yeah, I would love if he is going to be ghost hunting in that area in general, whether it's now or never, future investigations, I'd love to hear more. I mean, I would hope to go back out there, because that place does sound pretty interesting. Yeah.
Next time I'm in that general area, I'll have to send you a picture of this house, because it's beautiful. Maybe I could look it up. Actually, what you can do is look up Leggett Road on Google Maps. And it's white the house itself is white. It has a red tin roof, and it has a porch that wraps around half of the house. And let's see, I think Dad said there was a wine cellar, that it had a wine cellar at one point. But yeah, if you look on Google Maps, Leggett Road, you might see it.
I'll have to take a look at that in just a second.
Absolutely.
Now, one other thing that you mentioned too was about Sale Creek, Tennessee. Can you tell us a little about Sale Creek, Tennessee?
Sale Creek, it's a small town. It's in between Dayton and a place called Saudi Daisy, and it's kind of sandwiched in between Dayton, Saudi Daisy, and Bakewell. And that's where where I spent most of my life, was in Sale Creek. And we, like I had mentioned earlier, we lived on the mountain, and it wasn't quite in the middle of nowhere, but it was a ways away. I mean, the closest Walmart was about maybe 5 miles away, 10 miles away. And it was the reason how it got its name, I think, is because during the Civil War, soldiers would, I think they would, like, let me see, they would sell stuff off to people, and that's how they got the name Sale Creek. And my dad told me of a old Civil War cannon that's stuck at the bottom of a creek somewhere. And a lot of people have tried to get it out of the creek, but, it's just so firmly stuck to the bottom that nobody's been able to get it out. But there's a lot of cave systems. My dad has told me about somebody had gone into one cave and they found the corpse of an old Civil War soldier leaned up against the wall. It was really serene and beautiful during the day, but when night would come around, you wanted to stay inside, because that sense of, being watched was always really heavy. But some of the best days of my life were on Sale Creek Mountain and in Sale Creek in general.
Sounds like a very interesting place to have a picnic, if you ask me.
Yeah, absolutely.
Ryan, with everything that we've talked about here, what do you think? From the Dogman to Bigfoot to the paranormal?
I think it's very interesting. I'd like to pick Hannah's brain if I could.
By all means.
Okay, Hannah, do you think that Bigfoot, Dogman, all these cryptids, are they tied to the supernatural world in any way, in your opinion?
I would like to say so, yes. I mean, but I would also say that they are flesh and blood creatures.
Mm-hmm.
I would like to also say that maybe they're guardians of some kind. I think that these guys are like people. There's some bad and there's some good.
Mm-hmm.
And but I don't really think that they're truly evil. But I could also go back and talk about, the case about the Land Between the Lakes Dogman.
Yeah, the incident with LBL has always been debated, of course, whether it was flesh and blood or a supernatural creature, even, too, with whether it was Dogman or Bigfoot. There's always been that long-running discussion. But, I have to say, too, I mean, we've often always been asked, too, about our own opinions on, whether we think of them as supernatural or flesh and blood. And, I believe that there is a link between that realm, but I also think that there also is a link between the flesh and blood realm. We always steer more towards flesh and blood and try to steer clear towards the supernatural, because we always, at least in our opinion, at least to me at least, and Ryan, we think of them in different aspects. There could be that connection, but I think with very little evidence to support it, and only just hearing testimonies and stories, it's just hard to make out both. And I know it's very controversial, but I do respect your side of it too, because you do bring up that good point about that whole good or bad scenario, because we also too think that with good and bad. Well, one other thing I wanted to ask you too was, have you considered going out there and doing research on cryptids?
Absolutely, I would love to. Absolutely. I just got to find the right people to do it with. I would definitely consider taking my dad with me and a friend of ours, but I don't want to put myself in a bad situation where one of these is not the most friendliest of creatures. I don't want to put myself in a situation like that. But if given the chance, absolutely, I would love to.
Well, in the event, if you do, we'd be glad to give you some advice. We'd be glad to give you some pointers, even if, you'd rather me send you a message after the show and just showcase some of the things that we've done. Even Ryan, too. I mean, whatever it takes, because I know that when people go out and do research, it could be a good and bad thing, especially because if you do see the creatures, would you be prepared? And it'd be a matter. I mean, I always say to myself, whether I'm out there, if I'm prepared, I normally say no, because I don't know how to react. I mean, everybody's different with it, though. So, Ryan, do you have any additional questions for Hannah?
No, she covered my question pretty well.
Hannah, I will say this before we do conclude. Do you have any additional advice that you would like to give to the audience? Any additional words, whether it's cryptid or paranormal?
Don't go looking for trouble, because even if you don't mean to, trouble will come to you if you don't mean to go looking for it. You can just don't put yourself in a bad situation if it can be helped. Don't escalate the situation. Try to remove yourself from the situation the best you can. I have not had any cryptid encounters, but have had encounters with spirits. Where I work is a very, very old building. It's maybe about 100 or something years old. And before it was an animal shelter, it was an orphanage. And we always joke around that if something goes wrong, oh, it's the ghost children. The ghost children did this. And I remember specifically, two incidences, three instances. My job, I take care of our cats, and I work upstairs in a poorly ventilated area. But this place, as soon as you walk in the upstairs area, you get really creepy vibes. So, and I remember one time I was cleaning, and I had one side of my body facing away from the cages. And I was turning around to do something, and I felt what felt like something tugging on my pant leg. And, a cat wasn't reaching out to grab me. It just felt like somebody reached out, grabbed my pants, and was trying to get my attention. I usually play my music loud whenever I'm up there to drown out, the silence, because the silence itself, even though there's cats crying and puppies barking and swallowing, just the atmosphere alone is really, really creepy. And the second incident, this really freaked me out, because I remember I was walking down the hall and I saw a cleaning bottle just levitate up off a shelf and then fall to the ground. And I just kind of stood there for like a minute or two trying to get my shit together. And, I told my boss, what I had seen, and he's like, yep, that'll happen. And then another time, the same thing happened. Something levitated off of a flat surface and just kind of fell. And then we have instances where we'll see animal spirits in kennels. I remember a friend of mine said that he was doing something. He was doing something in the kennel, and he said that a voice, like somebody was like standing like right next to you, said, "Hey!" And so he did what anyone would do. He would turn around and he'd look and he didn't see anyone. And then there will be cases of you see an animal in a kennel, and you come back and the animal will be there. There won't be any batting or anything. It'll just be gone. So it's a creepy place. And my boss also told me about they had found a body in the basement where this man had killed himself when animal shelters still used gas chambers that euthanized animals. And so he just had enough and he just killed himself with the animals that were going to be euthanized and found them like that. And I personally haven't been down in this basement, but I hear that people have found skeletons of animals, cats, and the basement's flooded. It's just not a very nice place to be. And so I would like to avoid it as best I can.
Well, Hannah, I mean, for that experience alone, we want anybody to be prepped and to get an understanding. And I mean, that must have been very tough for you. And to go forth with that, I mean, I wouldn't know how to bear with that. It's just a shame when you hear those type of stories. But,
Yeah.
I mean, you do have a very good mindset and very positive one. So I would say, in general, in any case, it's very brave. And I think it's very right in its own sense to use those words. I know anybody should take those words out there, especially to newbies out there, is what I call it, to those who are new to this field, whether it's cryptid or paranormal. But, very informative and very understanding with it. And Hannah, I want to thank you again for doing the show. I want to thank you for coming on. And always, please note, if you want to talk or if you need any additional information, please feel free to contact me or Ryan. The Venomous Fringe is here for you.
Absolutely, and I appreciate it, guys.
Absolutely. Well, hey, Hannah, you enjoy the rest of your evening.
You too, and take it easy.
Take it easy now. Bye-bye. I want to thank Hannah again for coming on the show and for showcasing her opinions and beliefs on cryptids and paranormal. I have to say, she's had some pretty interesting things to talk about. Ryan, what did you think?
I found it very fascinating, and the fact that she actually mentioned a hyena-type creature, that's kind of hitting close to home for me. It's very... I saw it as a dog man, so...
It's funny because it's like when she mentioned hyena, I was thinking canine variant 2, which is a hyena-looking type. And on top of that, I also took a take to a lot of the cases where people in Tennessee, or at least the people who have had subsequent encounters, they too have mentioned a hyena type like one. And I'm kind of trying to build a thing here where it's like, well, are they necessarily in Tennessee as hyena types, or is there a certain patch of types that are there, or is it just kind of small coincidence? But the hyena type seems to be making its rounds.
Yeah, it kind of defeats my theory, though. I thought they were just like a regional variation. Maybe the hyena types were in the more southwestern states, but I guess I'm wrong on that one.
It's interesting too, man, because like I've often thought regional variations, like up in the northern region, I've always felt the canine variants 1 and 3 were more common there, like Michigan, Wisconsin, as examples. But then you hear all these cases even coming in the central U.S. and down south U.S. You hear people are now seeing different variations. So it really does fascinate me in a sense, man, of where we're really seeing these things and how many people are telling stories.
It does kind of lead credence to the whole migration theory, though. A lot of people do believe that they migrate across the United States, so that could very well be it.
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, personally, I feel that in many situations, there are so many types that do strike an appearance, one of which is very creepy, but two as well, that it does make you want to think, man, what is out there? Like what do you see? And if there are non-regional and these things are migrate in certain ways, it makes me question, well, how many different variations can migrate together? Because you often think that when you see a different variation of an animal, right? So you have your leopards, you have your snow leopards, right? Would those two, despite their differences, kind of get along, I mean, my point being is, what would it be if a hyena got along with a canine variant 3 regular werewolf-looking Van Helsing dog man, right? So, I know that kind of sounds ridiculous to some, but it's just a small thought, because it's like, could all these variants get along with each other if, they were put... Because they probably can understand who they are and what they are, but it's a matter of, I guess, just kind of getting the picture, right? So...
No, it's a very good question, though. I mean, you have natural animals that get along just fine, so why wouldn't they? It's entirely possible, I guess. I mean, I don't know. I guess we have to look into that question a little bit more.
We do. And then going into her report of her uncle seeing something, and then he was locked inside the place for an hour because he didn't know what the hell he was looking at. That's a very scary thought,
That is.
Because, and this is why I asked the question about if his mindset changed drastically throughout the course of it, because I'm thinking to myself 90% of the time, in many cases, that people are so traumatized by what they can see or what they come across. He mentions red eyes. And, I've always believed that red eyes shine doesn't mean that they're demonic, doesn't mean that they're any different than typical eye shine. But I do feel that whether the eye shine makes a difference or not, these creatures are still an aggressive creature. They can do anything. I'm sure even when you had your encounter, while it didn't do anything, you definitely did feel the intimidation factor and a little freaked out. I would too.
Oh, no doubt. Yeah, absolutely. It's just seeing something that you don't know what it is. You're so used to collating the animals that you do know or the beings that you do know that when you see something that you don't understand what it is, yeah, it definitely traumatizes you.
Absolutely. And also, too, if I might add, that when people do see these things, no one's in a rush to take a picture. No one's in a rush to be freaked out. Well, they are in a rush to freak out. I mean that in the most positive way possible. Excuse me, I didn't mean to make that typo or voice-o, as we call it. But I will say, though, that when people do see these things, that there is a reaction that isn't in any hurry to take a picture, isn't in any reaction away to go ahead and make a sudden move. We're frozen. We don't know what we're looking at.
Mm-hmm.
Like...
That's human nature, though. We see something that we don't know what it is, and by instinct, we're going to be terrified. I mean, you run into a bear. What's your first instinct? To panic.
Right. Now, see, to give an example, I was at a zoo today, and we had seen bears, and the difference between a bear that we see at a zoo and a bear that we see in the wild is that this bear that's in the zoo, unfortunately, is locked up in a cage. It's
right
in a position where it would have to use its full-on force to break down the cage. On top of that, I believe it was declawed. I think that many bears, if I'm not mistaken, are actually they either declawed or they have a factor to them where they don't necessarily have their nails anymore.
Well, they declaw them nowadays.
No, I don't know. I mean, I don't want to sound stupid to the audience, but I mean, it's very once in a blue moon does Chris go to a zoo? I mean, so I don't know. I mean, I don't want to sound ridiculous, but I mean, I could tell you for certainty that the zoo that I was at today, the bear was declawed. So I mean, it could have been rescued, it could have been declawed personally, whatever. I mean, I don't think anyone in the woods is going to just tranquilize a bear and then declaw it.
No, absolutely not. No.
I mean, that takes a lot of balls, if you ask me. But I mean, hey,
that's abundantly cruel to do to a bear, though.
Well, that's what I'm thinking too. I mean, like, my whole point of it though is that, and see, we've already lost. I've already sidetracked myself with bears. See what I've done? But no, seriously, like, I mean, when you're dealing with bear and in general dealing with dogman, the big comparison between the two is that they're both intimidating creatures. Dogman seemingly being this werewolf-looking creature, and then when you're looking at it, you don't know how to respond to it. And her uncle had the best reaction to it, which was simply to just go somewhere until this thing left. And I feel for those who are in the woods, especially when they deal with these things, because when you're in the woods and when you're dealing with these occurrences, you don't know necessarily what the outcome's going to be. It could be good or bad. You could be dealing with something here that's going to attack you, or something that's going to sit back and look at you and then run away somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
And then when you talk about her Bigfoot report about where they were camping and they had not just smelt that odor, but too, what happened to their camper. I mean, like, we've heard many cases of Bigfoots throwing rocks, scratching, tearing things up, even dogmen too, to RVs, to campsites and whatnot. As everybody may recall, about a month or so ago, we had 2 eyewitnesses on the show from Idaho whom had talked about visiting campsites that were damaged. And a lot of these campsites, you saw photos, did not look like it was done by a human being or even a bear. So, I think her father's reaction to it, being terrified, was probably genuine to me. I would be terrified too if that happened. And that's just because, I mean, let's be fair here. Who wants to see something like that to your camper, especially not just for the fact that you spent good money on that camper, but too, I mean, you also don't know what did that.
Right.
That
part of the story kind of reminded me of the phone call. Remember the phone call ways back where the guy was stuck in his camper, and these things were attacking him from every side.
Oh, really? Now, see.
Yeah, it's an old story. I think it goes back a couple of years where a guy was stuck in his camper and they were trying to turn it over.
You're not talking about the phone call, not the phone call from Michigan, right? Not the one where he.
No.
Okay, not that one. That as the thing has been debunked. There's this other one.
Yeah, I'll see if I can find it for you after the show, and I'll send it to you.
Yeah, no, that'd be something that we can probably showcase on a future event. This is the first I'm hearing of it. It sounds ridiculous, but it's interesting. But yeah, no, even for that Bigfoot encounter too, when Bigfoots mess around with certain areas, you kind of think to yourself, well, these creatures definitely have a lot of time on their hands. But I also think that they're just curious of the surroundings, or the fact that there's just this big-ass camper in their area, and they're just pissed that it's there. I mean, how many times have we heard stories of Bigfoots getting aggressive in certain areas because people are there, or in cases where there are certain things, whether there's structures or stick fragments or things that are in areas that just make these creatures like, yeah, this is your warning. And
anytime.
And then even too, like, not to just distance ourselves from cryptids, but then going into her case from the Confederate soldier known as Green Eyes. That was interesting to me because I think I've yet to see a single Civil War historical site that has been filled with nothing but paranormal. There's always paranormal in those areas. And
yeah, it's so common amongst that sort of thing.
And isn't it weird, man, how, like, a lot of people who check out, like, let's just say Gettysburg, for example, like, there's always someone coming out saying that they think they've seen something, but they don't know for sure. They think they've seen something, they don't want to sound crazy and get ridiculed.
It kind of falls into place, though, because there's such violence on those battlefields, man.
Well, to give everybody a historical rundown, the Civil War was one of the most brutal and violent wars, as everybody knows, if you went to school. And unfortunately, as a result, it was the most heaviest body count we've had in our war history.
Oh, for sure.
And no surprise that there could be 10 ghost soldiers that roam around in 1 hour, and then there's another 20 down up ahead by the creek. I mean, it's freaky. So to see that and the whole story of Green Eyes, I mean, this creature, or not creature, this apparition, right, had its head hit with a cannonball.
Oof.
And it's a headless apparition, or demonic apparition, one of which that manifests itself in such a nature that you can't explain. So I feel that, to me, that was probably one of the more complex of the situations, even too with the situation with the creek, all of which were very freaky reports. Very freaky.
Green Eyes is new to me, so I'm gonna have to research that one a bit more.
Yeah, there's a lot of history in Tennessee, man, I think has yet to be explored. I actually do want to invite folk who are not, let's just say, for example, like, I want to invite folk here on the show who might be interested, who are from Tennessee and would like to talk about ghost experiences, cryptid experiences, because Tennessee's filled with a lot of things, man, and I'm curious to find out more.
Oh, me too. Yeah, definitely. I'd love to hear some more people come on and tell us their tales.
Well, with all that being said, though, folks, I want to thank you again for watching The Venomous Fringe. If you guys would like to get in contact with me or Ryan, you guys can get in contact with us with a few different ways. You guys can reach us at thevenomousfringe@gmail.com. There is an email link down below in the description. Folks, if you guys would also like to check out it on the links and texts that you're seeing on the screen, feel free to. If you guys want to follow us on social media, we have our Twitters down below. We always post updates on the show, and if you want to just follow our social life, feel free to. We also have the Venomous Fringe official Facebook group. Now, folks, we like to post in there, we like to enjoy our time, we like to interact with our fans, as well as also other creators as well. And two, guys, if you enjoy this show, you'll love it, feel free to drop us a like on Facebook. We're always posting updates on there, too. With all that being said, ladies and gentlemen, my name's Chris, joined alongside co-host Ryan Tremblay, and you all have a fantastic evening.